In this week's parsha, we have dinim about acquisitions, people buying, people selling, etc. So the Rebbe introduces a halacha that we have, that when we are selling something, you can only sell something that actually exists. You can't sell something that's davar shalei bal olam, something that does not exist yet. So for example, one could sell a tree, and obviously if you sold a tree, then both the fruits on the tree and any future fruits will of course belong to the one who bought the tree. One cannot, however, sell the fruits that will eventually grow. Just the fruits that will eventually grow. You could sell fruits that exist, but not the ones that will eventually grow. However, there is an interesting halacha. A person could sell haguf lepeirosav. You could sell the tree as far as the fruits that are going to come from it. In other words, you're not actually selling the tree itself, but you're selling the tree to the person just as far as his rights to the fruits that are going to come. Now the Rambam says this idea that you cannot sell something of the future is only true in ordinary sales between ordinary people. When it comes to hektish, if a person says what my animal will give birth to will become hektish, will become holy to Hashem, will give it to the Beis HaMikdash, or will be tzedakah, then even though technically it didn't become hektish yet, because you cannot really give over something of the future that doesn't exist yet, but there is an obligation on the person to fulfill his promise to Hashem. His promises of tzedakah, a vow, etc. The Rebbe in this sikh is going to explain what all of this means in Avodas Hashem. So the Rebbe starts off by saying that the general idea of Avodas Hashem generally is all about making a kinyan, is all about making an acquisition. That is, a yid is giving over ownership of himself and everything that he has to Hashem, that it should be noticeable on every single thing within his possessions and him himself, that it belongs to Hashem. This is recognizable in his thought, speech, and action, that it's always going according to the way Hashem wants. Says the Rebbe, within this kinyan, within this acquisition that the Yid is giving himself to Hashem, transferring ownership to Hashem, there can be two different ways. There's what's called kinyan haguf, giving over your very self, everything of you, similar to the person selling the tree. There's also called kinyan hapeiros, giving over, selling just the fruit. What would be the difference? Guf would refer within the person himself to his body, all of his faculties, his soul, his intellect, his emotions. That's what would mean giving over the body. Giving over the fruit, the product, would be giving over his practical thought, speech, and action, which come as a result of all of the previous things. So this is what it means in Avodas Hashem. Kinyan Peiros, giving over the fruit, would mean a Yid is giving over to Hashem all of his thought, speech, and action, which are the fruits of the soul and of the previous mentioned faculties of the intellect and emotions, etc., which means that he's always very, very careful in everything that he's thinking, speaking, and doing, that it should all be in accordance to the Ratzon of Hashem, the will of Hashem, which is what Tanya calls a Beinani. But what about the Guf, giving over his very essence of his intellect and emotions and his Nefesh HaBahamis, etc.? That he doesn't really have the power. He's not freed from the possibility that some of these taivas, some of these temptations and thoughts are going to come to him. He's just in control of not allowing them to practically express themselves. So that's the Beinani. Kinyan HaGuf, the one that can give over everything to Hashem, nullifying the very essence of his Yetzer Hara and the very essence of all of his Seichel and Midas, his intellect, emotions, all of that given over only to Kedusha. And then automatically, obviously, that will be followed by all the speech and action. That's more the avoid of a tzaddik. He is called an Eved Hashem. What's an Eved? An Eved, a servant, a slave, is someone that belongs completely to his master, and automatically everything that he has will also be his master's. Says the Rebbe, so now we can understand what it means that a person cannot give over something that doesn't exist yet in Avodas Hashem. Someone that's not holding by that level of the tzaddik, where he gave over all of his insides to Hashem, the faculties, the seichel, the intellect, the emotions. He's only giving over the fruits, only the product, only his thought, speech, and action. So he needs to be cautioned. He needs to know that he only has the ability through his fights to practically be in control over his thought, speech, and action that he's involved in right now. That he has control over, but he's not really in control to give over to Hashem yet something that doesn't exist. So if he makes a hachlata that in the future he will do something good, so you can't say that he absolutely made that kinyan already. There isn't that certainty, 100%, that he will do it in accordance to what Hashem wants. Because since his guf, again, meaning over here is intellect, his emotions, his nefesh habahamis, his Yetzer Hara, didn't leave yet. They're still the way they were before. So every single time he has to have another fight with his Yetzer Hara, not to allow that taiva, not to allow that temptation, that desire of the Yetzer Hara to express itself in his thought, speech, and action. And therefore, we can't be absolutely sure what's going to happen practically when this next thing comes up. So that's what it means that a person cannot give over the future. But nevertheless, there is a way. There is a way of accomplishing that he's going to have control over the future to a certain extent as well. And that is what we spoke about, the idea that you could be makna, you could give over the guf, the body, for the product that's going to come out of it, or the tree for the fruits. So what would that mean over here? Says the Rebbe, the avodah of a Beinoni is not limited to only his thought, speech, and action, meaning that every single time he has some sort of temptation, he always has to fight to avoid that taiva and to overcome his temptation and to make sure that his thought, speech, and action are the way it's supposed to be. Rather, his avodah is to deal to a certain extent also with his intellect, with his emotions, to bend them, to have some sort of impact on them, to some extent at least, also on the Yetzer Hara that's in his heart and mind. As the Alter Rebbe explains that during davening, a Beinoni does arouse an Avas Hashem in a revealed way, to the extent that the Yetzer Hara, the Ra, the bad inside of him, is like asleep, and that does leave an impact on him for the rest of the day to be able to overcome his temptations. Says the Rebbe, this is what the Alter Rebbe says, that a Beinoni is really a person that not only doesn't do Aveira currently, he's never going to do an Aveira. Because according to his current situation, he's certainly not going to do an Aveira in the future. Because the Beinoni does have, to a certain extent, a certain measure of control over those midas of the Yetzer Hara, but again, not fully in their very essence, but only as far as that it shouldn't allow, in other words, only for the result of it, for the Machshava Dibur Maisa, that the inner parts of the Yetzer Hara shouldn't extend it, shouldn't express itself in a way that's going to cause him to do an Aveira. Says the Rebbe, so this is what it really means, giving over the body, the guf, for the Peiros and Avodah Zarah, meaning to say that even if a person is not holding at that level that he could transform the very essence of his midos, of his feelings in his heart, which would mean he shouldn't even have any taivas at all, nevertheless he could bring himself at least to this extent of control of the midos, at least as far as the Peiros are concerned, meaning that it should at least be to that extent that he will definitely not do an Aveira in the future. Or in other words, says the Rebbe, it's true, maybe not every person can come to that level of an Eved Hashem, which is like the tzaddik, which is a complete servant, which his body belongs to the Eibishter, and therefore there's absolutely no other choice at all. Everything is, of course, going to be Hashem's. However, we are shluchim of Hashem, shluchei shel adam kamoisa, even if not on the level of an Eved. And what's the idea of a shliach? A shliach is that every single one of his actions is, at least the actions, are given over and are completely in accordance to what Hashem wants. The Rebbe takes us now a step further and says, we mentioned that the Rambam says even though a regular person cannot be making a davar shalei b'layla, something that doesn't exist, but if you're giving something to hektish, it's different. What would that mean over here? Says the Rebbe, so even if someone is not holding at this level that he can give over mamish every part of his essence to Hashem, he does, and not even at the level that he can give it over for the sake of the fruit, for the sake of what's going to come out of it. Seemingly he can't do that. Says the Rebbe, but where does that apply? That's only when you're speaking about the hedyot, the ordinary things. Meaning only as far as things which are the mundane actions that a person does, which the truth is that even those things we need to do them l'shem shamayim. So here we might say, since these are things that are coming from our guf, whether it's our eating, drinking, sleeping, our business, etc., etc., so therefore these are the ordinary things. These are the things maybe we don't have control over the future, to be able to really make sure that are always all completely l'shem shamayim. But when it comes to actions of kedusha, of Torah and mitzvahs, things that are really coming from the neshama, it's only that we want that the Yetzer Hara shouldn't get in the way. So here we say that this is very different. This is like the idea of hektish. As far as kedusha, Torah and mitzvahs, if a person makes hachlotes tovos in areas of his kedusha activities, of his Torah and mitzvahs, so therefore, again, even though maybe the acquisition didn't actually happen yet, because the Yetzer Hara could still try to get in the way, and therefore, at some level, there's no certainty. But as far as the neshama is concerned, it's like we said, when a person makes a vow to tzedakah, he is obligated to do what he promised. And so too the neshama, as far as the neshama is concerned, it definitely wants to do the right thing. And because he made that promise and he's obligated to do that, he will surely have the assistance Malamayla from the Eibishter to be able to overcome the blockages of the guf and therefore to fulfill what he actually promised. And the Rebbe concludes with a bracha that he writes that through being involved in all of these halachas, we should be zoichet to the time that it says, by Yom Hu, on that day, Hashem is once again uses this expression, liknois sha'arami, to acquire all of his people when Mashiach comes. And it will be fulfilled what we say in Az Yashir, a similar expression. Ad yaver amcha Hashem, ad yaver amzu konisa, the nation you acquired. And through this, we'll also come to the other kinyonim acquisitions that the Mishnah speaks about, and mainly one of them being Beis HaMikdash, Kinyan Echad, the third Beis HaMikdash, b'mehera v'yameinu mamash.